The ClusterPolisEee project is co-funded by the European Commission under the Transnational Cooperation Programme South East Europe. ClusterPolisee's main objective is to enhance the capacity of the regional policymakers to confront, prevent and anticipate change, sharing different experiences or best practices, matching regional competitive advantages with international synergies. The project focus is the design of smart specialization strategies for clusters improvement. A 25 members partnership covers 12 different CEE programme countries, 8 EU MSSs, 3 IPA, 1 ENPI, to develop smarter cluster policies supporting territorial cohesion, R&D, and open innovation systems in CEE, encouraging cooperation between strong and weak performing regions. The ClusterPolisEee project adopts a methodological approach based on experiments in reflective policymaking as a basis for better policy formulation and implementation, foreseeing the creation of mutual learning tools suitable for learning processes, directed to a wide number and different dimension of stakeholders' consultations. The project work plan runs through a matrix approach where 6 cross-cluster areas are developed and implemented through thematic working groups. 1. Innovation, R&D-driven cluster development. 2. Sustainability through cluster development. 3. International cluster cooperation and networking. 4. Financial framework improvement, cluster financing. 5. Cluster and regional specialization. 6. New skills and jobs creation.
What do you consider the most important tools developed by the project in supporting cluster policies?
Innovation has been shaped by several project tools as learning platform, pilot actions and joint strategic policy plan to help the achievement of the project objectives and the sustainability of the developed action also during the future forward. In particular, the joint strategic policy plan is based on most relevant results of learning mechanisms developed. It will actively contribute to Cohesion Policy 2014-2020 new implementation period. The learning process itself represents a crucial experience in transnational development of policy learning, understanding and mechanism oriented to an institutional agreement to establish Southeast Europe Cluster Initiative. To summarize, ClusterPolisEee ongoing outcomes are capitalizing on synergies and spillovers in and between partnership and relevant stakeholders.
The most original feature of the ClusterPolisEee project is the creation of a common learning platform among all partners from different macro-regional areas, aimed at supporting the policy's implementation through cooperative learning. The platform is a collaborative and policy learning system aimed at transforming CEE into a broad-reaching laboratory for regional policy innovation, and at developing a competence centre in CEE in order to spearhead and test the advantages of the smart specialization model as a guideline for R&D and competitiveness policies. The platform contributes to map and tag the project results, to test one or more applications, to elaborate the joint action plan and initiatives for CEE space. The midterm impact and ongoing results achieved after 2 years from project start have been presented during the intermediate conference held in Novi Sad, Serbia, on 22 November 2013. Some key concepts have been underlined by in-depth interviews to relevant beneficiaries and stakeholders.
Which is the impact of ClusterPolisEee project on the cluster improvement at European and regional level?
Our aim within the ClusterPolisEee project is to develop smart specialization strategies in the whole Southeast Europe region for the support of cluster development in priority areas. Our main objective is to develop new ClusterPolisEee learning mechanisms that will be followed by a set of recommendations, a set of policy measures in order to enhance existing or either to develop new strategies for improving cluster policies on national, regional and European level. So the new policy learning mechanisms that will be developed may be considered are lessons learned from the elaboration of success factors, of good practices, of cluster policies and tools that will be further piloted by certain regions. Our ultimate goal is to develop effective cluster policies to maximize its regional innovation potential.
In my section of the project, we looked at existing policies, at future scenarios and how clusters, based on their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, would be able to handle the future. We carried out a few study visits, and based on these actions, which all looked at clusters, we further looked at 6 thematic areas, and these thematic areas influenced the other action. And based on all this information gathered, then we had a good or solid knowledge base on the current situation in Southeast Europe, and this basically will help to understand existing cluster policies and then to improve these in future.
The ClusterPolisee project is actively involved in the C thematic capitalization strategy that aims to strengthen the links between projects working on similar topics, thematic poles, to allow projects to exploit and consolidate one another's achievements and create a higher leverage effect. This approach allows to derive invaluable inputs and recommendations in view of the upcoming programming period 2014-2020. In this framework, project outputs aim at supporting ERDF, ESF operational plan design and implementation and integration, even by promoting new clusters to face the EU challenges.
How does the ClusterPolisee project contribute to the Southeast Europe capitalization strategy?
I think ClusterPolisee project can contribute in a very important way to the C thematic capitalization strategy. We have 122 projects approved, and we need to increase the visibility and impact of the results produced by the projects. So we created a Southeast Europe capitalization strategy with this aim, and we identify 14 thematic poles per topic. And one of these poles is innovation, governance and policy, and ClusterPolisee project is within this pole. ClusterPolisee can contribute to the joint activities, joint outputs to be achieved at the end of the process. So we think one of the joint events or joint outputs to be achieved are going to be very important for a successful implementation of the poles itself and for achieving good results.
ClusterPolisee is able to strengthen the coherence and the coordination of policies and actions in order to facilitate an integrated approach from different institutions.
What do you consider the main contribution of the ClusterPolisee project to the European integrated approach for the territorial development?
By involving partners from the Danubian and Adriatic Ionian areas, the ClusterPolisee strategic project is capable of strengthening the coherence of policies and actions to facilitate the integrated approach by different institutions and stakeholders involved. The ClusterPolisee project and the macro-regional strategy are both focused on encouraging participants to overcome not only national frontiers but also barriers to think more strategically. Two project actions will contribute to this scope through a fruitful comparison between Danubian and Adriatic Ionian areas, the ClusterPolisee project platform, and the testing of a professional profile of public manager for the development of clusters policies in a transnational perspective as a pilot action developed by market region.
Recognized as flagship project of the Danube strategy, Priority Area 8 competitiveness of SMEs, including clusters, it also offers several opportunities to foster the learning mechanisms and improve the integration of the smart specialization concept into regional cluster policy and practice across key thematic areas.